Good evening. We'll begin our study tonight in Isaiah chapter 1. We'll try to begin in earnest so we can cover these chapters. I don't want to rush, of course, but we have quite a number of chapters to try and cover in this class, if it's even possible to do that. But before we begin reading the text tonight, I just want to engage your mind for a moment. And I want to just ask, why do we come to church? When you hear comments from time to time, as I do, social media websites, Facebook, others, church isn't something you do, it's who you are. Well, that's true. We are the church. But we do attend church services. And so when we say we're going to church, we're going to the assembly. It's rather captious of people and an expression of ignorance, I think, on the part of people. To say, we don't go to church, we are the church. Actually, we're both. We do both. Had someone ask me, someone who grew up in the Lord's church, is it really a sin not to attend church services? So when you think about church and coming to church, coming to a Bible study like this, the question I would like to ask you, is just, you don't have to answer out loud unless you want to. You're welcome to answer, of course. But why do you come? Why do you bother being here? Someone could argue, well, Hebrews 10:25 says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Therefore, I'm here because the Bible says I'm supposed to be here. Well, the Bible does say that. And it is true that I have an obligation to be here as a Christian. And to be faithful as a Christian, I will be here. But the question is, why am I doing this at all? Why bother singing songs with other people? Eating bread, drinking the fruit of the vine, bowing my head in prayer with other people, listening to some crazy guy yell at me. I had 3 or 4 people say I was just yelling at them Sunday. Thankfully, my father's hearing aid wasn't working. He couldn't hear me. I'm like, well, I was just blowing off steam, But you had a comment. You want to say something?
Yeah. You were talking about people making the comment, we are the church. We don't do church. We are the church. Well, you're not getting together with the church. We're not each one of us individually the church. We are collectively the church.
We are part of the called out, yeah. And it is a called out assembly.
And I think,
okay.
And I think that part of the answer to your question is just before the verse you just quoted, verse 24 of Hebrews 10. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. We can't stimulate each other. We can't encourage each other if we're not together.
But that's the point I'm getting at. Why do you come here, Chris? You say, well, because the Bible says so. But there's got to be more to it than just that. I'm here for a reason. Or maybe I could say it a different way. If I'm coming here Sunday after Sunday, and it's not impacting or affecting or influencing my life, of what value is it to me to be here? Should I not have someone stimulating me or provoking me to love and to good works? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Not always?
Not always.
So we should be stimulating not to have love and good works. Is that?
But our job is to read and learn and
On our own, yeah.
on our own. And as you learn on your own, it is good to have others to teach or to.
You're talking like coals of fire. You put them together and it makes a hot fire because you bring the coals together that are burning individually, but you put them together and it makes even more heat. Is that what you're suggesting? That you take your Bible study and your relationship with the Lord and you bring it and share it with other people. Fellowship with other people.
Yes,
Okay. Share.
yes.
Okay. So that's, I hope, what we're trying to do here. One of the worst things I know that we can do is to be a member of the church, to attend church services, but to behave, to live like anyone else in the world. I know that when we live that way, when we behave that way, when we are hypocritical that way, when we're saying in essence one thing on Sunday morning and doing something else Monday afternoon, people in the world see that. They recognize that. And by living that way or failing to live up to the very thing we're to stimulate one another to do in these services, we're actually causing everything about Christianity, not just the church, but the Lord himself, his word, his people, his mission to the world, all of that to stink in the eyes of the world. It doesn't seem to make any difference in your life. It's not changing you. We really need to start thinking in terms of, when I go to church, I'm going there because I desperately need that time with other Christian people, because the world is beating me up and tearing me down. And I'm tired, and I need help, and I need nourishment, and I need encouragement. And so we come to the worship services. But I think most of us probably, to one degree or the other, considers that by showing up, by being here, God must be awfully proud of me. I could have just stayed home. I mean, it's kind of a dreary, almost rainy night. The weatherman was wrong again this week. Completely wrong again. I know this. I have to follow the weather very closely. And I was told that we'll have a good chance of rain Monday. Somewhat chance of rain on Tuesday. No chance of rain on Wednesday. And it came a deluge this morning. And then I was told also by that same weatherman, whose most predictions wound up with a he said around 6 o'clock it'll be raining again. And it became almost a beautiful evening around 6 o'clock. I'm like, just believe the opposite of what other weathermen say. But I think for the most part, we come to church and we feel like somewhere, to some extent, to one degree or the other, God must be really proud of me because I'm here. And I could be somewhere else. I could be doing something else. He must feel real good about me being here. Has a thought ever occurred to you that God's disgusted with your presence? That God doesn't want you at all. He would rather you not show up. Let's read the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's crib, but Israel does not know, my people do not consider. Alas, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a brood of evildoers, children who are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked to anger the Holy One of Israel. They have turned away backward. Why should you be stricken again? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faints. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed or bound up or soothed with ointment. Your country is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Strangers devour your land in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. So the daughter of Zion is left as a booth in a vineyard, as a hut in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Unless the Lord of hosts had left to us a very small remnant, we would have been like Sodom. We would have become like Gomorrah. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me, says the Lord? I've had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed cattle. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand to trample my courts? Bring no more futile sacrifices. Incense is an abomination to me. The new moons, the Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies. I cannot endure iniquity and the sacred meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They are a trouble to me. I'm weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourself, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doing from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Come now, and let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be as wool. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. How the faithful city has become a harlot. It was full of justice. Righteousness lodged in it. But now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your wine mixed with water. Your princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Everyone loves bribes and follows after rewards. They do not defend the fatherless, nor does the cause of the widow come before them. Therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will rid myself of adversaries and take vengeance on my enemies. I will turn my hand against you and thoroughly purge away your dross and take away all your alloy. I will restore your judges as at the first and your counselors as at the beginning. Afterward you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion shall be redeemed with justice, and her penitence with righteousness. The destruction of transgressors and of sinners shall be together, and those who forsake the Lord shall be consumed. For they shall be ashamed of the terebinth trees which you have desired, and you shall be embarrassed because of the gardens which you have chosen. For you shall be as a terebinth whose leaves fade, and as a garden that has no water. The strong shall be as tinder, and the work of it as a spark. Both will burn together, and none will quench them. I don't know how God could be any clearer in his view that the worship of some people he hates. He said that. I hate it. I don't want it. And he's actually saying to the people of Judah and Jerusalem, who invited you to my assembly? Who invited you to trample my courts? God is enraged. And the reason for that is these people are guilty of a number of things, and we want to talk about some of the things of which they were guilty, but they seem to think that they are delivered to do these things, to behave this way, and to live this way, because they still regularly attend these assemblies. And so I go to those assemblies, and therefore I'm delivered to do whatever it is I choose to or want to do. And so we might say they were using religion for their own purpose, maybe to salve their own conscience. But either way, they clearly were not allowing these assemblies to have the desired effect, namely to instill within them a sense of true and undefiled religion, which they had not learned. And so the prophet begins, I have raised up children. I've nourished them. You almost get the impression from God's perspective that when he's now describing Judah and the inhabitants thereof through the prophet Isaiah, That he sees his people as a father would a rebellious teenager. And if you've ever raised children and they get to their teenage years, at some point, as Bill Cosby would say, they lose their minds. They're deranged. And they think they know everything and you don't know anything. You're stupid and I'm smart because you're old and I'm young, or whatever. And so they get this crazy notion that they know everything and they don't have to tell you anything. And they don't want to tell you anything because they think you're old and outdated and a fuddy-duddy and out of touch. Sometimes our children behave in ways that it literally breaks our hearts. It breaks our heart because we say, you know, and we don't mean to look at it this way, but we can't help but see it this way. I have invested a lot in you. I fed you, changed your diapers. I taught you to walk. I taught you to speak. I put clothes on your back, a roof over your head. I educated you. I taught you to do just about everything you know to do. And now you're old enough to be interesting and to use the stuff that I've taught you, and you don't want anything to do with me. You want to just throw me to the side because I'm a fuddy-duddy or whatever. You know how teenagers are. They don't like their parents because they're deranged, and they go through this hormonal derangement. And then one day they wake up in their 20s and say, you know, my parents are pretty cool. My parents are all right. They know what they're talking about. But it takes a while to get through those very difficult years. And I get the impression when I read this that God's almost seeing Judah in that light. You know, you just put the rebellious, you don't have any respect or regard or no gratitude for anything that I've done for you. Now, we could ask the question, what had God done for Judah? In the very beginning of God's chosen nation of people, from the very start, they were questioning God's goodness. I want you to imagine that you are enslaved in Egypt. And you and the generation before you have been serving in rigor. I mean, this is hard bondage. You get no respect, no regard. You have no rights. And so every day you cry out to God, you offer your prayers morning, noon, and night, and you ask God to send a deliverer. You're begging God for freedom because you're tired of someone else telling you when to get up, when to go to bed, what to do, and how to live your life. You're just tired of that. You want to be your own person. And so Moses shows up with a shepherd's staff, and one by one you see your oppressors' economy decimated and their gods humiliated. I mean, roundly so. And you see all of this. And then you see the very Pharaoh that's been oppressing you say, look, just take the silver, the gold, whatever, but just get out. We can't take any more of you. And he sends you packing, and there you now have your first taste of freedom, and you're marching out of Egypt for the first time, and everything's going just wonderful. And all of a sudden, here you are at the Red Sea, and someone says, hey, guess what? The Egyptians are coming after us. And you have the nerve to say to Moses, did you drag us out here so we could die in the woods? It'd been better to stay in Egypt. Can you imagine saying that to Moses? Well, they did. They actually did. So God says, stretch out your staff over the water, and he did. And they walked over on dry ground, came out on the other side, stretch out your staff again. He did. And the waters came collapsing on their pursuing enemies, and they were delivered. And what, 3 days later? What are we going to drink? What are we going to eat? You bring us in here and die in the wilderness of starvation? And so God allows bread to simply appear on the ground. All you do is pick it up and eat it. And water just running out of a rock. You can drink it freely. Whatever you need. And if that's not enough, here's the quail I'll blow in the camp. You know, we're tired of this. You know what's really amazing to me is how desperately these people wanted freedom, and the minute it's granted to them and they see that there may be some responsibility we're not going to have to shoulder ourselves, we want to go back to the chains of slavery. Well, that's insane. Why would you want that? Well, Listen to what they said in chapter 16 of the book of Exodus. This is quite insightful. They journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Zin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. Let me say that again. The 15th day of the second month, so 2.5 months after they departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and we ate bread to the full, for you brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." The thing about government handouts is the government hands it out. Because when the government hands you something, with that handout, there are all kinds of strings attached to that handout. And so here's all this cucumbers and onions and leeks and whatever, and you can have it. You just have to work 24/7 for us. That's the only string attached to this. And here these people are saying 2.5 months into their freedom, we want to go back to that. That's crazy. Is it? How long have we persisted as a nation? More than 2.5 months, I'm happy to say. I think we lasted longer than Israel. You know what's really telling? When the president of our country has to say publicly before our houses of representatives that we will not be a socialist country. Who would have ever dreamed, in my lifetime anyway, that our president would have to make such a declaration? I mean, my whole life, socialists and communists have been enemy number one. But now suddenly our president said, we ain't going that route. Why is he having to say that? God gave them food. He gave them protection. He gave them freedom. He gave them a law, a holy law. Deuteronomy 4 verse 5, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great who hath God so close to them as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Nothing can compare to the law I'm giving you. He even, as a loving father would, discipline them when they needed it. Judges chapter 2 verse 20, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. He said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant which I commanded their fathers, have not heeded my voice, I will no longer drive up before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of the Lord to walk in them as their fathers kept them or not. Therefore the Lord left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hand of Joshua. In spite of all these things that God had done for Israel, they became an offspring of evildoers. What were their sins? Well, verse 29, notice what he says in chapter 1. They shall be ashamed of the terebinth tree which you have desired. What's this a reference to? He's referencing their idolatry and their desire to pursue idolatry. Now, let me ask you, why was it that Israel, the northern nation in particular, but also the southern nation of Judah, why was it the people of God were so determined to follow after idolatry? What's so appealing about idolatry? Anyone know?
They had a long way to go to come to Judah to worship at the temple.
You're saying traveling convenience?
Traveling convenience, yeah.
But the people living in the city of Jerusalem were given to idolatry. They weren't traveling anywhere. They were already there.
But it was the northern states that had to travel the farthest.
You're talking about why Jeroboam set up the calves of idolatry.
Well,
Okay. But again, what's the appeal of the calves? What's the appeal of any idolatry that Israel and Judah had? You had a comment, Brother Pettingill?
Seems to me they wanted to see something.
Wanted to see something.
They wanted something they could see with their eyes. Of course, they had seen the Red Sea parted. They saw Pharaoh's army drown.
You remember when Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel, and he was taunting them, because they were calling on their God to light the sacrifice. And they they jumped up on the altar and they're dancing about and they're cutting themselves. They still do that in the Middle East. Muslims do. They go and they cut themselves. They're all bloody. I'm like, I don't know what that means. But that's what they do. They're not cutting themselves, and I guess there's something visual with that. We can see the blood. We're cutting ourselves and we can feel it, and we're really getting into this worship. Surely Baal's going to hear us now, because look at it, we're really hurting ourselves. Elijah, what's he in the restroom or something? Maybe he's asleep. Yell a little louder. They hated Elijah. I don't know why preachers think they can be smart alecks, but this man honestly thought he could just smart aleck his way out of it, but he just literally smarted off to those people. And they just kept on screaming and hollering and jumping. But what's the appeal of idolatry?
It has many appeals, but it seems that the primary appeal was, as free love called today in our society, is that they could vent the desires of the flesh in their partying and
Wanton.
in the way they wanted to and please their God while so doing.
Wanton desire, yes. In the name of religion, we choose to engage in orgies, horrible, detestable behavior. In the name of religion. That's what caused Israel to sin. And that's what Balaam taught Barak to do, was to convince Israel by parading around these beautiful Midianite women, and they were able to lure them into their idolatrous practices and ideas. And many of them suffered because of it. But that really was the appeal. When you think, why would somebody be stupid enough to bow down before a rock or a piece of wood? I don't understand that. It's just bizarre. And Isaiah later is going to make fun of these people. They cut up a piece of wood and take some of the stuff they've cut off that log, and they build a fire and they knead dough and cook with it. And some of it they're using for the fire and to eat with, and other stuff they're bound down and worshiping. It's just insane. It's stupid. And that's what Isaiah basically, he was a smart aleck too. He was just laughing at these people. But you got to realize there's more to it than just, hey, that's a nice piece of wood, I want to worship. It's that piece of wood lets me do what I want to do in the name of religion. So I can feel good about being religious and doing what I want to do.
It's almost like instant gratification.
Oh, yeah. Whatever you want to do in the name of religion. Yeah, Brian?
Well, you mentioned teenagers when they seem like they lose their mind, and one of the biggest things they do is they reject authority. Well, in essence, idolatry is rejecting the authority of God.
Exactly.
And grabbing that authority for yourself, where you can self-correct, create God in your image rather than the other way around. I'd rather, if it wasn't so serious, it would be a ludicrous conversation with a person on Facebook that when the subject of God came up and the Creator, oh yeah, they believe in the Creator. Well, you can't believe in what's written because that's a construct of our imagination. The way they rejected the authority of God was to say, well, the only way you can know the truth is if you could feel an intuition where you've made a connection with God.
You
If
feel
you
it.
do that, then how you feel is right.
Yeah, I feel it, therefore it's right. That's idolatry. Yeah, that's what it is. Making God in your own image. Making God think and do and believe what you want him to think and do and believe. You think about idolatry in that form, in that way, you're like, that's crazy. Nobody believes that. I have to share this with you. You may or may not find this interesting, but yesterday I had a new inmate assigned to me. I've got a couple of them. One of them just left today to go home, and the other one's leaving in a couple of weeks to go home. So I was assigned a new inmate, and I thought he's different. But anyway, he got on the van yesterday morning, and we were getting ready to pull off, and I pulled over to the side, as I typically do, and I said to the new inmate, I knew how the others felt, you mind if I offer a prayer before we start our day? He's like, whatever works for you guys. I knew then, Well, first of all, I learned he was from California and only been here a few months. I already knew that it probably is different. They're like, well, y'all do whatever y'all want to do. And I'm like, okay. So as things progressed, you know, he's a good worker, but he's a white guy, and he has skinhead tattooed to the back of his skull, which makes working with the other inmates on my detail a little bit difficult. They're not real pleased with him wearing that tattoo. I'm not pleased with it either. I don't know what to do about it other than talk to the warden. But today I'm just talking, making conversation. You know? Well, I take it you're not a church-going guy, because every time we have prayer, every time we talk about the Bible, he just kind of goes over the side and just stands there. Doesn't say anything, doesn't make waves, just stand over to the side. I'm like, I said, you're not, he said, I wouldn't say that. No, I'm not a church-going guy. And one of the inmates in the back spoke said, well, I mean, I'm just curious now. Officer Gray's asking a good question. Are you Baptist, you Methodist, Pentecostal? What he said, I don't go that way. And I went, well, what are you, an atheist? He said, no, I believe in the gods of the north. And I said, well, what hemisphere are you referring to, gods of the north? I'm talking about in Europe, the gods of the north, like Thor. And I'm like, oh, and he named 2 or 3 others. I'm like, I never heard of the others he named, but he definitely mentioned Thor. And I'm like, oh. He said, but whatever y'all want to do, that's up to y'all. I mean, I'm not going to judge you for what you want to do. I said, well, we will definitely judge you for what you do and what you believe. So just rest assured, you're in the South, and that's how we are. We're mean-spirited people. He's like, are you serious, miss? Yes, I'm very serious. So yeah, I'm not sure what to do with this guy. I mean, I don't have a problem with him religiously. I just find it interesting. He's from California. But I do find it interesting that he's actually out in the open, I believe in those ancient gods of European descent. I'm like, I've never met anyone that actually believed that, but he's respectful of us, doesn't interfere with our prayers or interfere with our Bible discussions. He's very respectful, and I'm respectful of his idolatry as far as that goes. But I found that interesting. I thought, well, he's from California. Let's move on. Notice what else we learned. Verse 21, the faithful city had become a harlot. It was full of justice, and righteousness dwelled in it, but not anymore. They now take bribes. You know what's interesting is that God is aware of what happens in our courts. He's aware of the judgments that judges render. God's aware of that. When the Supreme Court, for example, just a few years back, said all 50 states in this union must recognize, whatever it means when they say this, it's gibberish to me, but they must recognize gay marriages. So we're all now forced to accept gay marriage because those 9 judges, by decree, have made it a law, and we cannot go against those 9 unelected judges who actually rule in this country. I'm not getting ahead of you. I'm just stating facts. I mean, we know what's going on. And so now we have... Do you think God's aware of that? Or in 1973, when the Supreme Court literally made up out of whole thin air a woman's, quote, right to murder her baby. Do you think God noticed that? Or when you see a multi-tiered system of justice, and you know you do, I do, we all do. You know what's sad is that this multi-tiered justice system has now become a political weapon. And so if you happen to be in the right political party, you get a pass. And if you're in the wrong political party, they're going to come after you with everything they can throw at you, because you happen to disagree. We live in very scary times. And what scares me most is that most people are unaware of just how precarious the situation we are presently in. These are dangerous times. They're dangerous times, okay? And so, and I'm sorry that people don't know that, but we are in very dangerous times. And so we have judges that literally, they'll they'll sign, warrants for this, and they'll accept what they know to be false information in order for a facade, a ruse of an investigation to go forward. They'll do those kinds of things because he's not in the right political party. Now, this other person over here in this other party, the entire universe knows of the multiple lies and scrubbing of her resources, bleaching them, whatever that's supposed to mean. And that's okay, whatever. She's one of us. She's part of the state, and so we're not going to come after her. We'll let her have a path. And you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to tell you what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. It's everywhere, and we see that. God sees this. And, when I think about the civil rights movement, and I think about how unjust, how deplorable it was for the Democrat-ruled South to tell a black man, you can't drink from my fountain. Because when Democrats ruled here in the South, that's how things were done. It's what Democrats have always done, and they're still doing it. I'm sorry, but that's just a fact. And you can't drink out of our water fountain. You can't ride on the front of our bus. I'm glad things have changed politically here. Unfortunately, so has a revision of history. But God sees that injustice. Martin Luther King, others saw that injustice and decided to stand up and say something about it. Maybe we need to have some MLKs stand up and say something about the injustices that we're seeing today. This is not right. This is wrong, what we're seeing. I believe God will judge us as a nation of people because we no longer have the courage to stand up and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. It may be difficult. People may call us all kind of names. They might even shoot at us. But it's time that we stood up and started speaking the truth. Someone has to speak the truth. You had a comment, Brother Mitchell?
Well, we get an awful lot of history in the Old Testament of what Israel and Judah, how they lived, whether they were abiding in God's word or not. And we also have the benefit of seeing God's side of it through the prophecy. Everything you're describing is nothing new. It's not the first time it's ever happened.
No.
But in the Old Testament, God explained why that happened. When it's easy to say, well, this is happening because evil exists in America. Well, that's true, but evil's always existed. But I believe, just like when we read what happened in the Old Testament in line, that evil circumstances did not necessarily happen to Israel because there was evil people around them. It happened to Israel because Israel was not doing what Israel was told to do by God. Otherwise, God would have shielded them from that. No different from us. All this stuff that we're seeing going on today and frustrated about is not because there's evil people in America. They've always existed. It's because we are failed to do what
We're not standing up and speaking up, and you're right. We're just letting evil run rampant. You're very good point. Evil has always been here, and evil will always be here. The only thing that keeps evil at bay is when good people, godly people, stand up for what's right. And we saw that, like I said, in the early days, at least, of the civil rights movement. Those were very valid points. A person should not be judged because their skin color happens to be different than mine. That's just not right. That is unjust. That is immoral. It's deplorable. It should not happen. Unfortunately, the reverse of that is now happening. And I'm probably one of the most hated people in America, and so are you. Because of your skin color and because of your religious conviction. Right? That makes you a target in this country because we have sat back, not we meaning me and you, but I mean as a nation we have sat back and allowed these things to happen without challenging it, without saying, that's not right. You shouldn't do that. We're afraid of being called hate mongers, or we're going to get involved in politically incorrect speech or whatever. I'm not interested in being politically correct. I want to be biblically correct, and I want to do what's right in the sight of God. And you can call me whatever you want to call me. But, it's time that we just started speaking the truth and let the chips fall where they may. But I think part of the problem is we've been afraid for too long to simply say what needs to be said. Now, God says when you come to appear in my courts, I don't appreciate it. I don't like it. I hate what you're doing. Why? Because your hands are full of blood. How are their hands full of blood? What kind of blood did they have on their hands? Does anyone know? The blood of the innocents. I'm very thankful that our president in the State of the Union stood up for and defended the rights of babies who he said are created in the image of a holy God. That is something we need to hear more of from our elected officials. I'm so thankful that he said that. It's tragic, isn't it, that so many in that room, upon hearing that, refused to clap or stand, but made it clear we are on a very different wavelength than you. That is scary. And they're wearing white. Interesting, isn't it? So you can wear white, you can go to church, you can do all the stuff you want to do, but if your hands are full of blood, what does God say about your devotion? What does he think about it? And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. I don't care how good you look or whose side you're on. If what you're doing is not pleasing to God, it doesn't mean anything. And so you've lost. What about our courts who encourage us to promote same-sex marriages, abortion, murderers and their rights? What about idolatry in America? Are we guilty of such? I mean, not everybody's from California. Not everybody worships Thor and the gods of the north, whatever that means. But we do have idolatry on a grand scale here. Paul said in Colossians 3, covetousness is what?
Idolatry.
And what is covetous? What's another word for covetous?
Hold on to your money.
Materialism could be another word, couldn't it? Are we a materialistic society? Indeed. Are we a multicultural society? Multiculturalism, denominationalism, all these other isms are just forms of idolatry. And like you said a moment ago, we're trying to make God and or the church in our own image, to make religion conform to me rather than me conform to true and undefiled religion. It reminds me when I read Isaiah chapter 1 of what James said in the book of James. And we haven't even gotten to verse 5 really. Was Judah suffering? Yeah, they were suffering. And the reason they were suffering is because they had rebelled against the one who had provided so much for them. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves. We're going to get through more than chapter 5. I promise you that. The Lord's willing, and the creek doesn't continue to rise. We'll get past chapter 5. So just hold your horses. Any questions or comments before the bell is finally rung? Yes, sir.
You were asking earlier why we come to church.
Yes, sir.
My reason is, Jesus said where there are two or three gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. So we need each other for the Lord to be amongst our midst. He didn't say he'd be amongst our midst with us reading the Bible by ourselves at home.
Or on the lake fishing.
We need each other for the Lord to be amongst our midst.
That's a very good point. Where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I. I mean, who doesn't want to be in his presence in that way? That's a very good point. Yes, sir.
Well, the way I think I can reason this, especially chapter 1, book of Isaiah, I think the true displeasure of God was that the people of God knew
Yes.
and had not a voice about it. And yet they still come to worship God as though all is well around them. The world, like as you put it in today's time, so much homosexual activity and so much sin in the world. But as we go throughout life, we voice not the displeasure of God about the acts of the world that transpire in life. But yet we come and worship God as though all is well in our spirit being. And I think God is displeased with that.
I believe he is too. Don't you believe he has his people here for a reason, and the primary reason is to speak his word, speak his truth? I believe that's true. And you made a good point, because when we generally talk about these hot button issues, we come across and sometimes even say, I don't like this, or I don't agree with it. It's really not a question of what I like or dislike. The Lord is not pleased with that. The Lord is displeased with it. That's how we need to present it, because that's the truth. That's what's wrong with it, is God's not pleased with it.
You know, he told his disciples when he sent them out in twos to go out and spread the word.
Yes, sir.
But if it was not accepted, you have to dust off
Move
your
on.
head.
Dust your feet
But
off.
they were to go and spread. We see activities, we know of transactions, the government's transaction and all, but God's people are silent. So silent.
That's unfortunate.
Truly a disgrace unto God, and I feel as though in reading just chapter 1, it baffled my consciousness about myself.
Yes. We need to do some soul searching, don't we? And I believe that's what Isaiah chapter 1 encourages me to do.
God is in us all.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Those are very good points.